I'm Dustin, and the fantasy playoffs are here. Welcome to Fantasy Smack Talk. This is your Week 14 waiver wire. Plenty to talk about, and if you've ever heard us talk about adding a whole bunch of running backs to your bench, now you're seeing why with all the injuries and all the players getting put on the commissioner's exempt list and all that craziness. But plenty to talk about, running backs in particular. Before we get into it though, I rank these in order on how I would pick them up based on 0.5 PPR. I shoot this before the Monday night game and keep that in mind. And I always start with my pickup of the week, which is brought to you by FanDuel. If you haven't signed up for FanDuel, if your season long hasn't been doing that well, if you're not going to make the playoffs, click the link in the description, sign up, join, deposit some money, and play in some daily. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't been getting in there, go in there and check it out. My pickup of the week is the guy that I think should get kind of the most attention, kind of the most added out of everyone for the most part. You know, there was a couple guys that might get slightly more added than this guy, but I'm going with Rashad Penny for this week. If you've been watching the shows this year, you know I'm a huge fan, and we're finally starting to see what he can do when healthy. You know, the offensive coordinator came out and said he's going to be more involved, and he was getting more involved earlier on in the game. But the thing that excites me the most about him is he just passes the eye test. He looks legit. He looks the real deal. Now, Carson isn't going anywhere. I'm not saying Penny's going to take this job over outright. But I'm just saying, I've been talking about it over the last few weeks, if you got a roster spot, handcuff one or two of your running backs if you're looking good and the playoff run and all that fun stuff. But if you own Carson, I think you need to grab Penny. He is one of the most exciting handcuffs out there. The Seahawks want to get him more involved, but Carson's just played too well. But Carson does have the dislocated finger. We'll see if that factors in, but sometimes all it takes is a little tiny injury like that for the coaching staff to justify making the move. I just think Penny needs to get added in more leagues. Only owned in 35% of leagues right now. He's passing the eye test for me. I don't mind him as of just a bench spot. Other running backs, Jeff Wilson for San Francisco. Burita just cannot stay healthy. I don't love his upside overall, but in terms of just a running back that could have short-term value, he's someone to look at. Same with Samuels for Pittsburgh, and he does have tight end eligibility in Yahoo leagues, which is certainly interesting. Connor went down. They're calling it a bruise, which I guess is, could be a lot worse. There is certainly a chance Connor plays this week. I'd actually be a little bit surprised if he does, but I don't think he'll miss more than a game if he does miss a game. But Samuels is certainly going to be added in a ton of leagues. I think, obviously if you own Connor, you need to try to get Samuels. And then Justin Jackson, he looked really good. Eckler came in, and, we knew Eckler was going to be the more featured guy, and he was in terms of touches, but Jackson looked like the better, more explosive running back. We'll see if Melvin Gordon can come back week 14. I think there's a decent chance he does. But if he doesn't, Jackson is certainly going to be, maybe worthy of a flex option and deeper leagues. Let's talk about some more running backs. Ty Montgomery starting to get a little bit more involved in Baltimore, so keep an eye out for him in PPR leagues. Rex Burkhead is back. Weren't sure how he was going to factor in, but he did have 9 touches week 13, so that puts him back on the map in deeper leagues. Damian Williams for Kansas City. After all the Hunt debacle, Williams looked pretty solid. Ware's still getting most of the early down work, and they did just re-sign Charkandrick West, so keep that in mind. But Damian Williams didn't look too bad. Then I do want to talk about one other guy, Ronald Jones. Don't forget about him. He is back. He didn't get too involved week 13, but he is back out there with Tampa Bay. He's healthy again, only on 10% of leagues. There's a chance he could get slightly more involved down the stretch, so I don't mind him. It's just a high upside bench ad if you're looking for a guy like that. Wide receiver, what does Adam Humphries have to do to get owned in more leagues? Still only owned in about half of all leagues, which I think is kind of crazy. 5 touchdowns in the last 5 games. He's more than just a PPR guy. Start trusting that he's the real deal. Humphries needs to be owned in more leagues. Dante Pettis for San Francisco, 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. He's certainly become, somewhat of a consistent guy out there as of late. We'll see if it continues. I do think, these may have been his best games, but he's looking decent. He needs to be owned in more leagues, only 5% owned. Curtis Samuel, this is a guy I've been talking about a lot. He's only owned in 20% of leagues. I guess people just aren't buying it just because, some of his good weeks have come, with him getting involved in the running game. They're not really buying it, but He's had 5 solid games in a row, including some blow-up games. I think he needs to start getting some more attention. I want to talk about Zay Jones out there with Buffalo. He's been finding the end zone a decent amount as of late. If you look at his game log, though, it's been a crazy roller coaster for him, but it's hard to ignore a guy that could, blow up for 20-25 points at any given time. So, he is going to be boom or bust, but Zay Jones, he should be owned in more than 5% of leagues. Jordy Nelson had a decent game week 13. It seems like he's healthy right now. We'll see if he can put together a decent ending to his season. He has had some highlights this year, but for the most part, it's been disappointing for him out there in Oakland. But I don't mind him in deeper leagues. And then I do want to talk about Bruce Ellington for Detroit. Now, this is a guy that I like in deeper PPR leagues, full-point PPR. If you look at his yardage totals, they're not that impressive. But when you look at his targets and his receptions, he's certainly been hauling in some passes. So PPR leagues, I think he's got a decent floor with the lack of wide receivers that they have healthy or out there for them now. So don't mind Bruce Ellington. Let's move over to quarterback. I got to talk about him because he's still only 60% owned, but that's Mr. Prescott. You got to be looking at playoff schedules when you're looking at people to potentially add. He's got Philly, he's at Indy, and he's got Tampa Bay to end the season. That's not bad. And like I've been saying in these videos, I think he's a QB1 the second half of the year. He certainly has been up to this point, so I think he can finish strong. Then I do want to talk about Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. It's just the rushing stats here. Those guys have been running all over the place and looking pretty good doing it. The thing I like about Lamar Jackson, next 2 weeks he's at KC, then he plays Tampa Bay. Those are some nice matchups. And Josh Allen, you're not going to get a ton of touchdown passes or passing yards, but he's been averaging about 50 yards rushing per game, which is certainly a nice bump from any quarterback. So I think Josh Allen should be owning more than 10% of the leagues. Tight end, it gets even harder with the Olsen injury. Tight end has just been a mess this year, and there's really not that much to get excited about. Everett looked like he could be, certainly a guy that's starting to get exciting, but, kind of a dud week 13. And I don't mind Smith or Herndon for Tennessee and the Jets, but again, you're just kind of reaching at this point at tight end. But in terms of guys that I think are still have somewhat of a decent floor that do have, kind of some unknown potential. We're not sure exactly what the ceiling is for these 3 guys. I do think they're going to slowly get better, and they will be in the fantasy, equation over the next few years or so. I think they have bright futures. So they're the ones that excite me the most instead of grabbing one of those older guys that's a little more boring. And then my pick up and play defenses, I'm going in the same game here. Over under for this one's 38.5, and the offenses I think are definitely going to struggle in this game. But we got Buffalo at home against the Jets. I think both of those defenses are solid plays for this week in the first week of the playoffs. So hopefully you all are in. If you got questions, leave them in this video. Make sure to mention if it's standard PPR. Hopefully you all are doing well, and good luck on the wire this week.